Hey, good evening. We're going to wait for a few more people to show up. The picture probably says Paul Mickley. That's not me. That's the person that has the account. So give it a few more minutes here. There's about 18 people, then we'll get started. Well, I got 6 o'clock here, so let's get started here. A few housekeeping items here. We're going to go through this thing, and I'd like to save all the questions and answers to the end. If you look at the top left of your screen, there's a Q&A. If you have any questions, if you want to type those in that box, we'll get to them at the end here. We can review and go back. It'll just help keep things flowing better. That way, the whole thing will work out better. If you have any troubles hearing me, I hope you don't. I guess I'll look at that a little bit here, but just you should be able to hear me by now. So again, little housekeeping Q&A. If you have any questions, please type them in that box right there, and I'll go back and review them all when we're done and try and answer any questions I can. So anyway, we got about 6 o'clock here in the Midwest, and let's get this thing started here. We got our first tornado warning of the season happening here and in Minnesota. So spring is here. The ice is going rapidly. So let's anyway, a little bit about me. My name is Kurt Hedquist. I'm a avionics marine specialist. I am in the Midwest here, and I fish some fishing tournaments with my son, Mac. And we've had some success and won some tournaments and stuff. Spent a lot of time on the water. With electronics, I work with Bruce Doc Sampson. Anybody familiar with Doc Sampson? He is known as Dr. Sonar. And if you got any questions in the future and things like that, you can look him up on his Dr. Sonar Facebook page. Give him a like, and I help facilitate his page there and answer a lot of questions and stuff like that. We both work together on it. It's his page. I help moderate it, answer some questions if he's not around, things like that. So give Dr. Sonar on Facebook a like and check out his page. We also got a lot of great sonar information on that page too, a lot of tutorials and screenshots and things like that we work on. Also, I'm part of the Lowrance Pro staff, and I work at Cabela's and do Lowrance boat shows and things like that. Work at the display at the Lowrance boat show. So some of this is kind of geared towards Lowrance because that's what I use, but much of it you can take over to other products and other brands of sonars and things like that. You can also look me up on my Facebook page, Kurt Hedquist Outdoors, and I have a website called kurthedquistoutdoors.com. And a YouTube page. I got some good videos on there, things like that. As far as I got a video on understanding sonar and some other stuff like that. So check that out. And so that's kind of the basics, nuts and bolts of my stuff here. And let's get rolling here. Introduction. This is kind of where we're at here. What we got going on here. The introduction. First place I'm going to start is mounting trolling motors, and then some wiring tips. Talk a little bit about the networking of NMEA 2000 and Ethernet, because that's quite huge nowadays, the networking of sonars through NMEA 2000 and Ethernet. So we're going to kind of go over that a little bit. Mounting sonars, mounting your transducers. There's some good ways and some bad ways, and a lot of this stuff I've learned again on Doc's Facebook page by helping people out. They've they'll send us pictures of why they aren't getting a good picture, why they're not seeing stuff on their, you know, with their sonar. So, you know, have them send us pictures and we can take a look at it and kind of work on that. We'll talk a little bit about chargers and batteries. You need power to run this stuff. And then we'll throw some various tips and tricks in there. And then at the end, we'll do a question and answer. And again, if you got any questions, again, if you joined here lately, there's a Q&A at the top of the page. If you would type your questions in there, that way we can keep this thing flowing. I've tried to answer questions on the fly and it just really it's hard. So we can go back, review questions and things like that. So let's get rolling, keep on rolling here. Mounting trolling motors. Some tips here. First thing is always read the owner's manual. Nowadays these things are pretty complicated. It's not as easy as you look. Again, read the owner's manual. Next thing, when in doubt, use a qualified installer. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, take it to an installer. Last thing you want to do is have issues on the water of something breaking down and having issues with your sonar and, you know, things just not working out quite right for you. Use the proper gauge wire to power your trolling motor. If you're retrofitting a boat or putting most new boats are pretty decent, you know, they come set up with the correct wiring, things like that. But you don't want to overheat the wiring. You don't want to have too small a wire, which could cause a lot of issues. So verify with your manufacturer on the requirements of power wire. Make sure you get the correct power wire going from gauge wire from the battery to the trolling motor. And also plugs, you know, make sure if you got a plug, if you're gonna use a plug to disconnect from the gunnel, the power supply, make sure the plug is adequately sized to handle the current draw, because these motors can draw a lot of current at full load. I believe when I run, it's probably pushing 50, 60 amps at full load. So if you run too small a wire, you could run into some real issues, some real fire issues. Make sure make sure the motor has adequate clearance on the gunnel when deployed. So if you're installing a new trolling motor on your boat, let's say you're switching brands or different styles, deploy the trolling motor. Make sure the shaft clears the side of the boat when you drop it down. You don't want to drill all the holes and deploy it and find out that it's hitting the side of the boat. So that takes two people. Here's another good one. Try and position the head of when mounting the head of the trolling motor when mounting it so it doesn't stick out past the boat rail when stowed. You see a lot of boats where the top of the trolling motor is sticking out like a foot or two off the side of the boat. You come into a dock and that's the first thing that's going to catch. So again, two things. When you install it, deploy the trolling motor, make sure it clears the side of the boat, and when you got it stowed, try and keep the head of the trolling motor inside of the gunnel so it doesn't catch on docks and things like that. And if you got a cover too, if you put it outside of the gunnel, a lot of times the cover won't fit anymore. And that's another thing to keep in mind too, is if you got a boat cover, if you're switching brands or whatever, it may not be designed for that motor. Always use a fuse or a breaker based on the manufacturer's requirements. You see this quite often. A guy has a trolling motor in his boat. He may have a existing fuse or a circuit breaker in his boat. He ramps that trolling motor up to full speed and it shuts off on him. Lets it sit for a while, it resets, ramps it up again, boom, shuts off on him. So verify that any fusing or breakers that you have on your boat for the trolling motor are adequately sized for what you got. Another great idea that I like to recommend is to use a quick release bracket for easy removal for service, or just taking it off. Let's say you're staying out of town at a hotel or somewhere that you really don't trust, a quick release bracket is very nice for that. I got a picture of what I use. But the other part of it too, if you got to take it off for service, nothing's worse than trying to get to some of them screws that are underneath the top cap, underneath the front there. I mean, on my boat, I'm at my full arm's length at the very front of the screws, and the fiberglass chews up your arm by the time you get up there. So a quick release bracket is just very easy. It's worth the expense and a little extra expense to be able to remove your trolling motor, either for service or security purposes. And a lot of the quick release brackets now have the ability to put a padlock on them or something like that, so you can lock them down if you're just stopping someplace. So here's another one. Always check under the mounting surface for adequate support. So if you're setting your trolling motor on the front cap, look underneath there and make sure you just don't have, like, some boats, like my boat, for example, it's got, I want to say a 3/4 inch backing plate underneath it, but it doesn't go underneath the whole front top cap in the front. If you move the trolling motor too far forward, you're going to miss that mounting, that extra support under the front of the boat. So when you put your screws in there, you may only have the 1/4 inch fiberglass or the aluminum, and you're going to miss the backing plate. So you're going to have problems trying to get that with screws and bolts pulling through. Another good one is always use fender washers underneath it to prevent the bolts from pulling through. There's a lot of torque in these things. When you get them going, you can really see them whip back and forth. Use the recommended number and size of bolts that they recommend. They'll tell you in the IOM. Another good one too is use a shaft support on the head of the trolling motor to support the top of the trolling motor. For example, on my boat, I got an XI5. That shaft, when it hangs out there 5 feet or whatever it is, you start hitting some big waves, that thing whips back and forth a lot, and it'll start banging on the gunnel. You know, when it starts hitting on the gunnel, it'll start, you know, you're going to have issues with it not working right. Another one that's real important nowadays is route your power wires away from sensitive electronic cables. So you got trolling motor wire, let's say number 8 or number 6 wire, and it's at full, you know, there's a lot of current going through there. There's a lot of, there's a lot of EMF going on there. You could, if say you got your trolling motor power wires strapped to your, let's say your power cable to your sonar, or you got it strapped to your transducer cable going down to the transducer in the front of the trolling motor. You fire that thing up and your screen fills up with static, you know, to get screens, it's all staticky. Look at that, separate those wires, or if you're installing it, try and separate those out. Recheck your bolts after a couple of outings. Oh, I should have backed up. We'll stop right there. This is being recorded, so at future dates, I'm going to put it on the YouTube page. It'll be on the Navionics page also for reviewing. So if you think I'm going through this a little fast, I'm trying to stay on schedule here, and but it will be available for future reference. Here's an example of what I got going on in my boat. Let's see. Okay. Here's an example of the trolling motor removable bracket I got on my boat, and well, you can see there. So you can see the mounting bracket right here, and I got 6/4 inch stainless steel screws through there, and then this just sits over the top. This bracket here goes through the 2 holes here, and right down here, you can see you can put a padlock in down here, right down in here, and you can secure it. One other tip I will give you is when you're putting these bolts through your gunnel cap like this, put a little bit of never seize on them bolts. It'll prevent the when you're tightening them up. Stainless steel has a tendency to gall or lock up, and once they do that, it's a real bear cat to get those out from up underneath the front there. So I got a picture of it, but it's one of my tips and tricks. Just put a little never seize on those bolts before you tighten them down, and that way when you screw them in there, if you're using like a screw gun, you drive it pretty fast, it'll overheat, and it will lock up the threads, and then it's a real pain in the butt. So you're down to your last one, and well, then you'll have a real problem. And just a reminder for those that are joining a little bit late here, type any questions in the Q&A. You'll see it in the top left of your screen, I believe is where you'll find it on your screen. And I'll come back and I'll go through all your questions and try and answer everything I can, so that way we don't jumble up here. And I've tried in the past, and it gets to be a real mess. Keep things on task. Oh, back up here too a little bit. So you can see how far this hangs over the side of the boat. So that's one thing you want to be aware of, is that when you deploy a trolling motor, it clears the side of this outside of this boat. A lot of the manufacturers in the IOM manual tell you that they want like 1 inch of clearance or something like that. So you got to be aware of that. So when you drop, first time you get on the lake, you drop your motor down and it's hitting the side of the boat, you can't get it down. So that'd wreck your day in a big hurry. Big one nowadays is trolling motor networking. You see this more and more. Lowrance has networks with the Motor Guide XI5. Humminbird networks with the Minn Kota trolling motors. Both do it a little bit differently, but networking is a cool feature that's available in many new products nowadays. The cool thing about that is, if you look on the screen of these Lowrance sonars right here, you can see menu options on top of here. So you can actually sit back in the boat and program routes on the sonar screen for it to follow. You can tell it to steer left, right, anchor mode, things like that. Now this stuff has become very popular in the bass market too. If any of you watched the Bassmaster Elite Series on Mille Lacs Lake last year, you've seen a number of boats with an anchoring type trolling motor. It's great for open water fishing. You get off the trolling motor, with the cable drive with the foot pedal, you get off it and you're shutting off and the thing's going crazy. These anchor modes, it's pretty nice. It's an anchor is what it is. It stops you right where there, holds you there, gives you time to, if you get distracted in the boat, you can go in the back of the boat and unhook a fish, re-rig, retie, things like that. So for open water fishing, they're pretty cool. And the trolling motors are getting more, they're coming into alignment more and more. There's some new stuff out from Minn Kota as far as their cable steer, their hybrid unit. The Motor Guide unit, for example, here steers pretty fast and things like that. So it's a pretty cool deal. But the networking is definitely worth checking out, depending what product you're buying. And many of them, depends on what kind of what unit you're using. For example, the Lowrance system here, these cables you see is called the NMEA 2000. And we'll go over that a little bit further here. But another thing on the XI5 Lowrance, you need what they call the gateway. It basically converts the signal or the language, so the Motor Guide can talk to the Lowrance products. Wiring tips. Here's a dandy, huh? I'd like to dive into that thing. A friend of mine sent me this from Florida, and that is wiring extreme. Anyway, let's see here. Take a peek at the top here. Oops, back up. Wiring tips, install. Read the owner's manual again. It's going to be one of my first things I always say. Read the owner's manual. When all else fails, go back and thumb through it. There's always stuff in there. And the second thing, when in doubt, use a qualified installer. Some of these guys have been doing it forever, and they see different boats, and they know all the nuances of various boats and things like that, what to do, what not to do. So if you don't feel comfortable, there's no problem in looking for a good installer. It'll make your time on the water a lot happier and a lot less headaches. And we might not get as many questions on Dr. Sonar either. But here's a few tips on installing. Route your sonar cables, your power cables, and your transducer cables away from other cables if possible, such as live well, pumps, bilge pumps, radio antennas, and things like that. You get if you have a VHF radio in your boat, there's a lot of interference that comes off that thing when you key up that mic. So be very aware of that kind of stuff. Try and keep them as separate as possible. There's some stuff that's, I got a couple, I didn't have it in here, but they actually show you running the power wires for like the trolling motor, let's say for a bass boat, on the left-hand side of the boat and all your sonar wires on the right-hand side of the boat. But be aware of that when you're stringing wires through your boat, where the power wires are. So you got a 12-volt motor. And those aren't very good motors in those boats. Those live well and bilge pumps, they're pretty, they're not very high-end. They're pretty cheesy. And there's a lot of interference that comes off of one of those motors. So be aware of that. And again, if you're on the water trying to troubleshoot interference, turn things on and off. If you see a live well, if you turn on your live well or your bilge pump and all of a sudden your screens light up, boy, you may have an issue with your screen not being it. You got a power issue. So, and anyway, so we'll kind of go and so that's that. Always use the manufacturer's recommended fuse and wiring sizes. So again, read the IOM manual, installation manual, and verify the fuses. For example, Lowrance, they come typically shipped with a 3 amp fuse. There's a reason for that on that kind of stuff. And verify that you get the right size fuses going on there. What else? Use if you're going to solder, and you can use solder. A lot of people use solder. Use solder and a waterproof shrink joints, shrink wrap on joints. So solder it up. There are some various solders out there that are better than other, but be aware of that. And shrink wrap all your joints. Or if you're going to use crimp connectors, there's some very nice crimp connectors out there that actually have the shrink wrap built onto them, and you can actually heat them up. Once you crimp the wire, and the wires are then crimped together inside this connector, and they actually have like a solder ring inside of them. You heat them up with a small torch or a heat gun, and it melts the solder inside of the joint, and it fuses that, and it also seals the wire. If you have any interference issues, again, that kind of comes back to if you have interference issues, try and separate the power supply. Oh, here, this is one. If you have interference issues, try and run a separate power supply to a fuse block for the electronics from the battery. There's a lot of installers that won't use the wiring that came in the boat itself just because of all the issues, potential issues. What they'll do is they'll run a separate set of wires, positive and negative, to a fuse block, and I got a picture of that here in a little bit. And so it's totally isolated from everything else in the boat, and they run it to a separate fuse block, and they use that to power their electronics. So if you're having issues with interference, that's one place to look at too. And like in Dr. Sonar, sometimes we'll recommend that too. If a person has a lot of interference on their screen, try and isolate it away from the boat wiring itself, and just run 2 separate wires, or even pull out extra batteries, grab an extra battery if you have one, wire your sonars to a separate battery, turn things on. And if your interference goes away, well, then there's issues somewhere in the wiring in the boat. That wiring that goes from the battery up to the console where the switch panels are. Some of those get after a period of time, they break down the connections and things like that. They don't make as well as they used to. Or you got some interference, something causing interference underneath there, maybe a VHF radio, things like that. Another great thing is label all your wires. Label all the wires as you're pulling around the boat. I'll show you a picture in a little bit, but for example, my boat, I got 1 on the bow, 2 on the console. And by the time you get all those wires run through the boat, you can have a real mess on your hands. Or I shouldn't say, if you do it right, it should look good. But on the ends of the cables, either use, get a label maker of some sort, and type in, if you got, for example, left HDS Ethernet cable. So, and then on the other side, label the wires so you can easily trace them through the boat without having to cut the tie wraps all apart and, feel for where it is. Because you get all that stuff tucked up underneath the dash, and it's all bundled together, and you got an issue. all of a sudden you got to start cutting all your tie wraps loose and things like that to trace out a wire if it goes from over here to over the other side or up to the bow to the console. So take and label the ends, you know, figure out how you want to do it, and label the ends of the wires. And another great idea I do is draw a wiring diagram or layout of your boat, how you got the wire, you know, the NMEA 2000 run, how you got the Ethernet cable run, where the power for your sonars, things like that. You know, just draw a freehand diagram, and so that way, when it comes, if you're on the water and you got to troubleshoot, or you're at the boat ramp and things like that, you know, you're not scratching your head thinking, oh, where did that wire go? Things like that. You know, it's a wiring diagram. I'm in the heating and air conditioning business, so we do a lot. I work a lot with wiring diagrams, and that's where I use that from. So it's a great reference. Put a copy in your boat, put it in a plastic bag or laminate it, stick it in the glove box. And if you have an installer do it, hey, have him draw up a little sketch of how everything's laid out in a boat. You know, Ethernet cable comes from the bow unit, goes to the left sonar on the dash. Then it goes from the left sonar on the Ethernet cable goes from the left sonar on the dash to the right unit. So draw it out. It'll make it a lot easier. Or if you have to take your boat in for service and you did the wiring yourself, you can hand the guy a wiring diagram that says, hey, this is how it's laid out. It'll work out. Another tip I guess I like to do is use the largest battery you can squeeze into a compartment. Many boats come shipped with a small, I think a 24 series battery when you buy them new. And you hook up a couple of sonars to them. You get a live well pump, a bilge pump going, maybe a radio, and that drains that battery down pretty fast. So like in my boat, and I know Doc does it and a couple other guys do it, I run a 31 series battery for my, I only got room on my boat for one house battery or starting battery. So I run the biggest battery I can squeeze in there, 31 series. And all the time I spend in the water all day long with everything running, I've never had a dead battery yet. Some boats give you the ability to use 2 batteries. You got room for 2 batteries. Some of the bigger boats, you can put a starting battery in it, then you put a house battery or a battery dedicated for all your electronics in there, so you get them separated. If you get the ability to do that, it's pretty cool too. Then you just charge that up, and so that's if you get the ability to do that, that's even better yet. But just remember that you turn everything on your boat, you're going to have a lot of drain on that battery. Always use marine grade wiring. Don't go cheap on the wire. You know, don't go to the hardware store and get, you know, get, you know, house wire, run it through there with solid core wire and things like that. Use quality marine grade wire. Some of, like, you know, you go to West Marine or some of those places, or some of the some of the houses, some of the marine dealers and stuff like that. They actually have it's a 2-strand wire, and it's jacketed in a white cable. It looks like a flat extension cord. It looks like what you find in your home wiring, Romex or wire that you pull in your house, but it's marine grade wire. And that's pretty nice because you can pull it through. Both wires are shielded. They won't rub on anything and things like that. Don't use wire nuts or electrical tape. A master power switch is important too. Now, for example, like on Lowrance, on the NMEA 2000, I'll show you in a little bit here, but the NMEA system actually has a separate power source for it. If you leave the NMEA 2000 powered up all the time, it's going to drain your batteries. So you want to make sure you shut everything off on your boat, so you don't leave. Because if I shut my sonars off the way my boat's set up, my NMEA 2000 doesn't shut off unless I hit the master power switch. So if I leave that out all night, or over the weekend sitting in the garage, my main starting battery may be dead or it might be low. So master power switch is important. And you know, once you get all said and done installing all this stuff, you know, always test it in your garage. So just, for example, trolling motor, you know, make sure you got you know, if you got it all wired up, just back up a little bit, the trolling motor there too is, if you got a voltmeter, let's say you got 12 volt, or let's say you got 12 volt trolling motor, or a 24 volt or a 36 volt, get out a voltage meter, check the voltage at the plug before you plug your trolling motor into it. So verify that you got the correct voltage there. And the polarity also. So it's you know, it's DC voltage, so you can have a positive and minus. If you got it backwards, it's going to read negative. So verify the voltage at the plug, and you know, deploy the trolling motor, test it out, ramp it up real quick, ramp it down, make sure everything steers, everything clears the boat, things like that. And the same thing goes with your electronics too. You know, you get them all mounted up, all wired. Before you launch that boat in the water, just power everything up and make sure everything run through everything, and make sure everything turns on and off, everything's communicating and things like that. So it's easier to check it out in the garage and versus on the lake when you're drifting across the lake trying to look for stuff. So anyway, just a reminder, I'll come back to all questions and answers. Feel free to leave them up there and I'll try and get to everything I can. So you know, I'm going fast through this stuff. Trying to keep it in an hour. I got quite a few slides to go through. So again, those that don't want to hang around for the full hour, you know, we can sign off, and those that want to hang around, I'll be around. Couple of troubleshooting tips that we see in Dr. Sonar. Sonar shut off when you're starting the main motor. Either your battery's too small, your battery's old, a connection is bad. You either got bad connections on the battery itself, a bad switch, a crimp on, a worn or broken wire, too small a wire to feed the electronics, corroded fuses. You got to remember, this stuff is pretty sensitive. It's a computer that's sitting on your dash, and that stuff doesn't like low voltage. I know, for example, on Lowrance, if the voltage gets too on the touchscreen units, they get a little quirky. So be aware of that. And you can always put your voltage display on the screen of your sonar so you can kind of watch it. But again, if your sonar, you know, you go out to your boat and you're sitting on the lake for a while fishing and you got everything running, and you go start the battery and everything shuts off in your boat. You know, it's either time to look at a new battery or a bigger battery. And if that's okay, then you're going to start going through all the connections and the wiring and things like that. Here's another one that we run across: electronics shut off when running across the lake. There, you know, if it's works fine when it's sitting still, and you start hitting waves and things start shutting off on you, probably got a bad connection. You get a switch that's maybe bad you know, you got everything run through the dashboard. You got connections on, you know, all those switches. After they get old, they get corroded and things like that. You know, if they don't make real solid, look for switches, wiring, main switch, bad connections and things like that. You know, if there's something that isn't supported just right, you know, if you hit a wave and all of a sudden, you know, loses power momentarily, you know, that's what to look for. And some other troubleshooting tips, again, if you got interference on the screen, routing of wires. Again, we talked about this earlier: transducer cables, sonar cable, power route. You know, make sure they're you don't have all your transducer cables and your sonar cables and your power cables for the console and the trolling motor all bound together in a big tie wrap bundle. That can really make your head scratch. You know, kind of the way to troubleshoot that, if you turn off all, you know, it comes to a troubleshooting thing, you know, it's a process of elimination. So trying to figure out what's causing the problem, you know, turn various components on and off. For example, there are some issues with trolling motors causing interference on sonar screens. You know, do you see it only when it's running? Or when it's, you know, when you power up the trolling motor, you see a lot of vertical lines or a lot of static on your screen. Okay, so then we know the trolling motor is causing that. There are some stuff out there about putting, drawing a blank all of a sudden, donuts around the power cables. I should have wrote it down. I should have wrote it on there. Anyway, you run your wire through a donut, a steel or iron donut, and it absorbs the, you know, help eliminate that EMF. So I know some of the websites, if you do a Google search on, you know, trolling motor interference or sonar interference where a trolling motor is running, there's a lot of good stuff out there. I mean, it's an endless thing. So we on Doc's Facebook page, sometimes the messages, there's a lot of back and forth. It takes a lot of time, a lot of troubleshooting. Again, approximately proximity to high output devices, radios, radar, etc. Bad pumps. You get one of them pumps in the bottom of your boat that's intermittent, you know, it's been in there for a long time and it kind of runs a little bit. You know, if you look inside of it, it's electric motor, obviously, and there's brushes and stuff like that in there. If those things start wearing, it starts creating a lot of static underneath there. That's going to give you interference issues. Again, trolling motors, bad grounds, check all your grounds. And the bottom line, it's not easy to solve. You know, this is something you can check in your garage too sometimes. If you get, after you get all done rigging your boat, get everything deployed, you know, turn on your trolling motor, turn on your sonars, watch your screens. Everything looks cool, you're good to go. You're probably time to hit the water. But if it's easier to find this stuff, if you're in the garage, you turn it on, turn everything on, turn your trolling motor on, all of a sudden one of your screens light up with a bunch of static. Well, now it's the good time to do that. And I guess one other little tip here too is before you tie wrap everything together, get it all bundled up nice and neat underneath the dash or under the gunnels, test everything, turn everything on. Because if you get everything all wired up and you haven't tested it, and you get everything all tie wrapped together, it looks nice and pretty, turn something on, it doesn't turn on, you're like, oh crap, and I got to tear it all apart. You're underneath there and get all your nice tie wrap jobs all mucked up. Now you got to go back and again, wiring diagram is very helpful. You know, going into it, rigging. If you, those of you that are rig boats, you know, it's a fair amount of work. So those guys that, what they charge, they put a lot of work. There's a lot of work that goes into it. If you're putting multiple sonars on it, transducers and bow mounts and all kinds of stuff. So you can really, it gets to be quite involved, crawling underneath the floors, reaching under floors, things like that. But you can really get into it. Earlier, I mentioned a fuse block. I found this at, you can find them online, but I think I found this possibly at West Marine. I think maybe even Cabela's carries them and things like that. So what I do is all my electronics, you know, if you buy a sonar, they come with a little fuse holder that you crimp in line, and then you, let's say for your bow mount, that's stuffed way up underneath the front. You got the inline fuse, that's stuffed up underneath the front, hidden and tucked away. And if you get everything all balled up and stuffed in there, it's hard to find them fuses. Or under the console, you have a lot of stuff jammed up underneath the console and trying to find them fuses and trying to figure out which fuse goes to which sonar. What I do is I get one of these fuse blocks, and I think it's made by, if you see it there, Blue Sea makes this one. And so by the time you get a lot of electronics, you know, everything's all, you don't want to wire nut stuff together. So this is what I do. Put one of these underneath my console of my boat. I put all the proper fuses on it. You can see that's that wiring I was talking about. You can see my labels on there. And so you can see where everything goes, label the fuses properly so you know which one, if you have a fuse issue, if you pop a fuse, you can find it easily. On the right-hand side here is a friend's boat. He does a lot of testing for electronics for Lowrance. So he has a lot of stuff in and out of his boat, testing components and things like that. So, and this is an easy way to do it. And you can see how he's got his labeled up. You know, you got 3D, you got structure scan, and things like that. Very easy way to find your fuses after the fact. You know, if you're going to run a separate power wire from a battery, you can run it to this. You got your positive and negative there, so everything's fed right off that point. You got your ground points right there. You know, everything is nice and solid, and it's just a very neat, easy way to install and troubleshoot and things like that. Another thing you got going on here, see the wire crimpers on the left-hand side? If you got them in your garage, after I'm done at this seminar, go take them, haul them out to the garbage can and throw them away. Those things are absolute garbage. They are, get rid of them. They do not work with a crud. I work in the commercial HVAC industry and don't use those things. See the ones in the middle? You can find those at most hardware stores and things like that. They're a good, solid crimper. I mean, they got a longer handle on them where you can put a lot of pressure on them, really get things good and tight. So if you're going to do crimping, use the one in the middle. And on the right-hand side there, a little dielectric grease doesn't hurt on your fittings and your connections here and there. It helps seal out moisture, things like that. So a little tube of dielectric grease, you can find it at any hardware store, and it works great on connections if they're tucked away underneath the floor. You know, you got underneath the floor, you got connections on the floor. Say you got a plug underneath the floor for whatever reason. Maybe you put a little bit on your trolling motor plug. It'll help, you know, seal out the moisture. Another handy item for pulling wires or working on your boat, a wire snake. You can find these very inexpensive at the hardware store, small ones, short ones. It takes the place of an extra buddy in your boat. If you don't have anybody to help you, you can shove it underneath the floor and pull everything back through. Anyway, let's tell you what, we'll take a break here and let's see if I can get this. Oops, back up here. There it is. We're going to take a break and have, there's 3 question and answers, so let's kind of have a good time to segue into the next section here. Let's see what we got going on here. Do you like the G-force dampener? I just put that on my boats. I really don't have a lot of feedback on that right now, Jarrett. And dielectric grease, yep, I use it on all the connections, even on the head units. I put a little grease on there, a little dielectric grease in there. Even though they got O-rings and they're sealed, I do put a little bit on there on the back end of there. You don't need a lot. And then Ben asks, aluminum prop upgrade, are they worth the money? I don't know, we'll find out this year. I just put that on this winter here, so, and we're still frozen in the frozen tundra, and it's going fast, the ice up here. So anyway, so if you get questions, again, question and answer, top left-hand corner, and I'll hang around as long as you guys want. NMEA 2000 versus Ethernet. This is kind of the brief comparison between the two of them. Each manufacturer has their own version of communications, but the NMEA 2000 is the industry standard, and I got some more details about that, but kind of the basics of NMEA 2000. It's motor functions, GPS, and things like that. Heading sensors, fluid sensors, and temp sensors, and things like that. I got some examples coming up here. Ethernet, again, on Lowrance system, I'll show you. You know, those just run from unit to unit, and transferring, you know, waypoint information, screens, and things, screen sharing, and things like that. Oops. Okay, here we go. NMEA 2000, I'm not going to go through everything, but I thought I'd throw some highlights at this thing here. Kind of give, so if you're wondering, there are some requirements for NMEA 2000, so be aware of that. Again, consult your owner's manual, read the directions and all this stuff, but up the top it just says what it is, kind of what I talked about earlier. But for example, NMEA 2000 on a Lowrance system, the new stuff requires a separate power source, and I get a wiring diagram for that. I'm not sure how the other manufacturers power up their NMEA backbone, but Lowrance requires what they call a power node. Only one power source in that NMEA 2000. Be aware of that. That you can only have, because when the old LCX stuff, the old Lowrance stuff used to power the NMEA 2000 out of the back of the sonar, or through the sonar, and then later on they changed it so it was a separate power source. So when you were installing like an old LCX or something like that that was powered through the unit, and you were putting an HDS unit on it, the HDS doesn't power the NMEA network anymore. So unless your LCX was on, your NMEA was powered up. Well, what they did is went away with that, and so now I'll show you here in a slide. It's faster, and I kind of go the old NMEA 183 next door here onto the right hand side here, so you can kind of see what it is. It's faster. NMEA 2000 is faster and sends more messages per second. It's kind of there. There are some requirements for this thing. You can only have a maximum of 50 devices on a NMEA 2000 network. The maximum backbone length is 300 feet. The maximum drop from the T to a device is 20 feet. You need terminator Ts on both ends of the backbone to absorb the noise. And on Lowrance stuff, if you have like an Elite TI connected to a NMEA 2000, you can do limited waypoint sharing, but both units have to be powered on. And so that's kind of that. Here are some components of a NMEA 2000. Again, I'm using Lowrance because that's what I'm most familiar with, but these components are very similar. Power system, you need a NMEA 2000 starter kit, and this is what that entails. Some of the, the T's, things like that. You'll look at the starter kit on the top here. You'll see, let's see if I can, there we go. You can see the terminator T or terminator ends right there and right there. There's the T, and there's actually two T's there, but this would plug into one of those T's right there and power up that NMEA backbone. Here's one of the T's, cords. Sky's the limit on this stuff. Here's an example of a NMEA 2000 network laid out. This is pretty heavy here, kind of a cool deal. Working with Lowrance is that we got a thing called the Lowrance System Builder. If you're at one of the sports shows or something like that, like the Northwest Sports Show, the Minneapolis Boat Show, or some of the shows where if you go visit the Lowrance booth, it's an app that the Lowrance people have, and you can actually plug in the components that you are looking at buying. It will lay it out device by device. So here it shows two Lowrance 12-inch units. Here's a 0.1 GPS compass, a fuel flow sensor. Here's the power. What's this here? I believe that's a temperature sensor. But if you just go down the line here, here's your radio, VHF radio, another unit here. Autopilot computer. Here I guess I got 2.1s on here. But anyway, this is typically what you'll find on a NMEA backbone. Here you got your terminator T at the end right here, or terminator end, I should. It's 120 volt ohm resistor. Here's the other end down here. So this can kind of run through the boat wherever. And this is where, going back to drawing a wiring diagram, and where do we go here? Sorry about that. Andre, I saw you raise your hand. Can you type it in the question and answer section there? It'll make it easier to find. So if you go in the top left-hand corner, or left-hand corner, yeah, Q&A. Just type your question in there and I'll get back to it. Anyway, this is where we're going back to drawing a wiring diagram of your boat. Imagine trying to figure this out on the water after a year where everything is going. Just sketch it out on a piece of paper and have a notepad. Do each one separately. Throw it in the plastic bag. Throw it in the glove box of your boat. And if you're sitting out in the middle of a lake somewhere and it's like something quits working, you've got an easy way to reference it. Ethernet. Here it's pretty much a plug and play. There is some programming and setting up within the units, but on Lowrance it's kind of a plug and play deal. You turn everything on, it'll look for stuff and things like that. Some of the things that it doesn't require an external power supply. I see my mug's right in the way here. There we go. Didn't move on your screen yet. Anyway. Local area network. Anyway, so this is kind of the basics of the what an Ethernet system is here, and I got a picture of what it is. But this is what you would find on a Lowrance system, for example. But the only thing it won't do is it's not capable of video transfer. Then we get to the end of this here. Maybe I'll stop and answer any questions on this. So that seemed to work out pretty good. Here are components for Ethernet. It's basically a straight cable with various lengths of cable. You got a 4.5 foot cable, a 7.5 foot cable, you know, different length cables. It's pretty much a unit to unit type connection. Again, you saw my other, my wiring one. All my units got little labels on each one of these ends, where they come from and what they're connected to. If you ever pull units off your boat, let's say you got it parked in a motel or someplace like that, you want to pull your stuff off your boat, and you go to your boat and you go back out there in the morning, you got all these cables hanging there. It's like, holy crap, what do I do with all this stuff? If it's labeled, left unit, Ethernet, things like that, a lot easier to figure it out, a lot quicker to get it on your boat. Okay, Ethernet. Again, this is using a system builder that you'd find into Lowrance people would have to help you lay out a system. And if you're, you know, it's kind of handy because if you're going to install it yourself, you can go to the Lowrance display, and I'm not sure what the other manufacturers have, but you know, tell them what you got, what you're going to put in, what you're buying. It will then tell you what you need for components. So, and tell you if there's any issues. So here, you know, it shows my transducers right here, an HST WSBL, which is a high-speed transducer. This PRDT WBL would be a trolling motor transducer. And then you got your units. You can see it's kind of a, right, this unit here, I got a structure scan 3D module. So basically the structure scan 3D module, everything runs down to that. And then once this is powered up, it kind of becomes the network. If I didn't have this down here, and that's all I had, I would just have a cable like this here, looping from unit to unit, just going like this to this unit, and that's it. But since I got a structure scan 3D on there, they all run down to here. And if you see this little exclamation mark, this yellow triangle here, what that's telling me here, if you read here, this unit must be on so the other HDS can access connected Ethernet devices. So what that's telling me is the way this is set up is that this unit over here has to be powered up in order for this unit to be part of the Ethernet network. But if I added this network expansion port down here, you see all the extra plugs on there, you can then plug into there, and now you'll plug some of these cables into there. Once this is powered up, it'll help distribute the network. So so all units will see it. But so anyway, be aware of that. There are some nuances with this stuff, and you know, wiring connecting this stuff up is huge. And this is where testing that stuff in your garage before you hit the water, make sure everything turns on, could be huge. Okay, let's see here. Let's take a little break here, and those of you who want to grab a bottle of water or beer or whatever, let's why don't you go do that. I'll answer the couple of questions I got going on here. Let's see here. John, the NMEA 2000 installation guide tells us to put a power on a separate T, but I've been putting the power on the end of the bus by removing one of the end caps, and this has just worked fine. I don't think so. That's kind of how I got mine set up, John. I got, actually I got all my stuff. All my NMEA 2000 Ts are mounted in a compartment, one of my front compartments. And I think it's just, what they're talking about is having the power spread evenly to both sides. You know, if it's in the middle and you got a lot of devices, you could be, by the end you get to let's see, so it's on the left-hand side, you got your power coming in. Let's say you got 15 devices across there. You could be dropping power to the far, by the time you get to the far right side of all those T's, you could have a power drop. So in the middle, distributes power evenly to both directions would be that, is the reason for that. I don't have a lot of NMEA 2000 on my boat, so to speak of. And, so anyway, that's where that's coming from. If you unplug a device out of the, let's see, Richard J. Swanson asked, if you unplug a device out of the T of a NMEA 2000 network, will it still function? Yes, it will. The device that you're unplugging will not work, but the whole network will work. So the whole network will work if you just unplug a device off the top of the T. Let's see. We'll back up here to the NMEA. So if you pulled out, let's say you unplugged this device right here, everything will work on that network because it's because it's just feeding off the side of it. Probably want to cap it or cover it up with something so it's not open, get moisture or something in there, because they do have an O-ring and stuff in there. But everything else will still work off that network. Let's see. Tony Bray asks, when I turn off my WAS, I lose my GPS. Tony, why don't you get a chance, go to drsonar.com, go to Dr. Sonar Facebook page, and type it in a message on there, and give me some more details as to what you got for a unit and stuff like that. Do you have external sensors and things like that? Give me a little more details on there, on that one. That's Tony Bray. Dave Gilkinson asks, I have a transducer on my Terova. I tried last fall to have my front Lowrance read off my Terova. I was vertical jigging underneath the Terova. It still seemed like I was reading the back. Any tips on how to accomplish this? Let's see here. Dave, this can be kind of a, this is a good one for, why don't you go, like I told Tony earlier, give me some more information on your system and things like that. But I probably would say you probably got multiple HDS units on it. You're going to have to do a select sonar. There's a select, what the unit to read off of is. And I can go into that a little more detail on docs. Actually, there's some stuff on there. So Dave, why don't you hop on Facebook, go to drsonar.com, and give me some more information on your system setup and things like that. It's probably just a matter of selecting the correct transducer. The sonar source is the other thing too. Well, we can maybe I'll give you a few tips here. If you got two HDS units, they're networked together via Ethernet. If you're on the bow unit, at the bottom right-hand corner of the sonar screen, you should see something that says sonar source, and it'll probably be like this unit or the other unit. So if you select sonar source this unit, it will then look for the transducer that's on the bottom of the Terova. And that's kind of what I find on my boat. There are some settings so you can separate that. For networking the sonar, the transducers, you can actually go into some settings and tell it not to network sonar. So the front unit's always by itself. It's always looking at that front transducer. And then the console unit's always looking at the back transducer. But I would have to say that is what's going on with your system if you got HDS units, which it sounds like. Obviously you got HST, WSBL, and you got a universal sonar on your Terova. If you're on the bow unit, look at the bottom right-hand corner and select sonar source, this unit, and go from there. What will happen then is when you go back to the console, it'll be looking at that front transducer when you pull the trolling motor up. So you're gonna have to go to the console unit and sonar source selection, this unit. Because it's looking, whatever unit the transducer is running into, that is what that transducer is looking at. Andre, I wish I could, let's see, I don't think I can. Andre asked a question, but I believe it's in French and I can't do that. Andre Labarge, go to Dr. Sonar's Facebook page and ask that question, and then I can answer it better. So I wish I could speak French. I believe that's what it is, but I can't. So that'd be my best suggestion there. Let's see here. I think, oops, a couple more here. Let's see here. Glenn Diot asks, I have a 208 tiller. I'm going to install a Lowrance 3D system. My question is, where would be the best place for the 3D transducer? And I was thinking about mounting it on the step section of the transom just in front of the left of the engine. Tell you what, Glenn, hold on to that thought and I'll run through that here. I got some slides on that. I got some sonar installation tips and things like that. So keep an eye keep an eye on it and come back for that one. So let's see here. Let's move forward here. NMEA 2000, we talked about that a little bit. I did a webinar last year, oops, on understanding sonar. So if you go to my Facebook, my YouTube page, and I did a webinar on understanding sonar, and this is kind of what I had everything all hooked up to my boat so I could. I did my webinar on this computer here, and I hooked these units up via Wi-Fi to this unit over here, so I can stream it over here on this screen, so I could do it all together. And then I had this as the view to see what was going on. So got a little complicated, but it worked. Another thing too, if you go to Dr. Sonar page, drsonar.com, I wrote an article on boat sonar buying tips. So if you do a Google search on this boat sonar buying tips, I put some tips in there about what, various, maybe you don't need all these units. Obviously I got a little overkill here, but anyway, go to that. If you got any questions, hop on Dr. Sonar and ask them there, and I'll try and get to them, meet or doc. Sonar mounting tips. Read the owner's manual. Can't stress that enough. Many times when I'm answering questions, I'll thumb through the owner's manual online, take a screenshot, and email it or send it to the person who's got an issue, and it's right there in the book. When in doubt, again, have a qualified installer install it. Look for their background. Don't have some guy that's, just make sure they know what they're doing. Oversize the mount. Don't go cheap. If you're buying an HDS or a big 9-inch screen or a 12-inch screen, don't buy an inch and a 1-inch ball mount on there and expect it to hold. It might look good in the garage when you got it all set, but my bottom statement there, remember, it may be solid in the garage, but the first big wave you hit, it's flopping on the console, and the thing is banging away on the console. You're hitting a big wave, so you got a lot of money tied up into that. Spend a little extra on a mount, and I got some pictures of different size mounts. So oversize the mount, don't go cheap. Use a backer plate underneath the console. So if you got a fiberglass console or a metal console or whatever, take a piece of plywood, put it underneath there for a backer, so the screws don't pull through, don't crush through the fiberglass, don't pull through the aluminum, and yada yada, that kind of stuff. Use a little Loctite or locking nuts on your nuts and bolts. Use the correct size bolts. Don't use a number 4 screw to hold on a 12-inch unit. 4 of those. Get a 1/4 inch. Go to the hardware store, get some stainless steel bolts. Use a couple of 1/4 inch nuts and bolts under to hold that stuff on there. Creativity in mounting may be required. I'll show you my boat. I actually saw a picture of my boat. The walk-through windshield. It was a real interesting trying to get 2 units squeezed on my console, but I did it with a little creativity and some shims and stuff. Here's a good one. Don't bend the wires or connections on the back of the unit too tight. So if you got them stuffed in a box and all your connections in the back of your sonar are rammed up against the sidewall of something, the side of your boat or the console or whatever, so they come out and make a sharp 90 and they're bent over real tight, your stuff's going to quit working real quick and you start pounding across the waves. So make sure when you come out of the back of the sonars that you got a little bit of wiggle room back there. You want to have enough room that if you want to take your unit off, you can pull it forward a little bit, get to the connections without having to crane or try and get your hand back there. So make sure your connections are coming off as straight as possible off the back of the unit. Don't tighten them down so they're just wedged in tight. So you want a little bit of flexibility in there, because all that stuff is plastic and it's pretty rugged, but man, driving some of these boats across some of these waves, this stuff takes a beating. So you're going to end up having cracked connectors on the back of your boat, or you're going to elongate the connectors when the plugs go in there. You look inside of there's just a little metal pin that sticks out that goes in a socket. They aren't very big. You start pulling sideways on others, you're going to elongate that stuff, and then you're really going to have problems trying to figure that stuff The other one too is make sure you can see where you're going. You see these screens getting bigger and bigger. What do they got, like a 15-inch screen or whatever? You know, if you go back to my boat, you know, that's a 9-inch unit. I can see over the top of that just fine, but you see some of these guys with a sonar that's, you know, it looks like a big screen TV in front of you. Try and remember, you got to see where you're going. And anyway, so it's so here's my boat. I had two 9-inch units here. The one on the right-hand side was very easy to mount. Nice little flat spot over here. The left side, I actually had to pull the windshield off and had a piece of plastic that was like 3/4 inch thick. My consoles are rounded. I had to take a belt sander and kind of round off a little piece of plastic so it fit the curvature of the dash. And then it was flat on top, so my mount would fit flush flat on top of that without putting any strain on the fiberglass or the bracket or anything like that. And a lot of different style mounts out there. So, you know, if you have issues, or one doesn't work for you, oops, back up here. Like these, for example, I couldn't use anything else, but these are called stable mounts. They're very low profile right here. Anything taller, I couldn't fit between the windshield and the dash. And they're called stable mounts, and they're very stable. They're aluminum, machined aluminum. And one thumb screw back here takes the whole thing off. Here's another boat. This is Doc Sampson's boat. And so you can see how his console is laid out a little bit different. He's got a lot of room here. You can mount stack 2 units over here and this unit over here. And so anyway, you know, it all depends on what you want to do and what you got going on. If you just got a single console boat or a tiller or something like that, you got one unit sitting here, hey, it's pretty easy. And let's see here. Move on here. Here's another guy, Mark O'Neill, structurefishing.com. Great guy, Lowrance guy, does a lot of stuff. You saw that one fuse block, the one on the right-hand side earlier. This was from his boat. He's got a couple different style mounts here. I think these are called Cisco over here. Very solid mounts. They actually, you twist it down there. It's a metal on metal contact point, I believe. And back up here. One more. These ones here actually have a nut right here, a bolt, I mean, that goes through here to the other side, and you actually pinch it down, so it's a very solid mount. So look at those. Ram mounts, yeah, they're there. Sometimes they hold, sometimes they don't. I've had the best luck with the more solid mounts like these here, the stable mounts that I use and things like that. But you know, here it may not be a problem because you see the unit's vertical like this, so it's straight up and down. But let's say you take one of these things and lay it down sideways and pull it out there. And this is only a 7-inch unit here too. But after you lay it out sideways like this, and pretty soon you start hitting waves, that thing starts working down and down and down. Pretty soon it's flipped over upside down. You can't see it. So if it looks solid in the garage, be careful. The first big wave, it might be flopping on the dashboard. Various mounts that are out there. You know, Johnny Ray swivel mount like this. You know, it just plops in the dash. You can turn it around back and forth. You got your Ram mounts right here, ball and socket type stuff. This one right here is called a Cisco mount. This one up here, I have no affiliation with any sort of mounting company or like that. I use the stable mounts on my dash. This thing is called a balls out mount. I saw it at working a sports show when I walked by and I saw this thing. This thing is machined aluminum. And I got one of these in the front of my boat in the console on the front of my boat. And so I got my 9-inch unit mount. Oops. What is it? Sorry about that. So anyway, it's a machined aluminum, and you actually tighten these things up here, and it's got little D10 balls in here. And I got a 12-inch arm on this thing, and it doesn't move at all. I think I could probably grab this thing and pull it out of the floor before it gave away. So do a little research. If you got questions of what mounts, you know, I talked about here, feel free to drop me a note or whatever. But and here you can see this one here is actually a lever here that locks in. This one fits in a track system, so you can slide it back and forth. I think you go to Mark's boat right here. You see this track system right here? You could actually slide your units back and forth. So it gives you some ability to move your units around. You just put the track on the down here, and you just slide it back and forth. Holy smokes, a lot of questions now. Let's talk about mounting the transducers and stuff here real quick, and then we'll be getting pretty close to the end here. Read the owner's manual. When in doubt, have a qualified installer install. Transducers can really be finicky. If you got, let's say you take it to a boat dealer that's installed 100 of these things, you know they're probably going to get it right. If they've done 99 of them on a boat like yours, there's a good chance they're going to get it right on your boat. Don't plan on getting it right, set right the first time. The height can be pretty finicky on these things. If you look at the owner's manual, read the directions, you'll see that there's various angles of these transducers have to be, things like that. Heights, you got it too high and it's not hitting the water cleanly. Too low and you're shooting a rooster tail, things like that. Another thing to look at too, if you can do it yourself, is avoid mounting a transducer behind objects on the bottom of the hull that will cause turbulence to the transducer. So before you start drilling in your new boat or used boat, crawl down, lay on your back, look forward of where you're thinking about mounting that transducer. So if you see a strake or something like that, or or a row of rivets where you think you're going to put it, you mount your transducer there, it will not work. So you want to move it, keep it away from those things that'll cause turbulence to the face of that transducer. I got a picture of this. Use a mounting board, a plastic mounting board. They're all over the place. I'll show you a picture of it. It's easier to just drill 2 holes in the back of your boat and mount the mounting board to the hull versus, and I'll show you. Use quality silicone to seal the screws that hold the board to the transducer on the hull or your transducer itself. Another thing, look at another boat like yours. If you're going to do it yourself, search the internet, go to some of the dealers and things like that. Take a peek underneath their boats, take some pictures and see where they got their stuff mounted. If a dealer's installing it, more than likely they've done multiple boats like that. So go there, ask on some of the forums and blogs and stuff like that. Every boat is different, but if you find a boat that's like yours, talk to the owner of the boat and say, hey, does everything work in your boat? You get good readings at speed, things like that. And he says, yes, well, that gives you a pretty good starting point. Measure twice, drill once. If you're using a through hull, follow the directions. Avoid air pockets underneath the face of the transducer. Here's a good one to ask people that have a similar boat. Sometimes you buy a new boat, they will come already installed in your boat. This is for aluminum, it doesn't work. Fiberglass, it does. For me personally, I got a fiberglass boat. I run all external transducers. It's just, I find I get a better reading with my boat. And sometimes you can test these things. If you fill the bilge of your boat with a little bit of water, put a little bit of weight on top of it, and hold it tight to the floor, and take it out on the lake and run around a little bit. Sometimes it'll give you a good idea, but if you get any air pockets underneath that transducer, underneath the face of that transducer, between the face of the transducer and the hull of the boat, you're gonna have issues. So there are some epoxies out there that are designed to glue down transducers. So I didn't write down any, but like I said, there are some out there. I know Vexilar makes an epoxy to go through the hull. A stepped transom versus a straight transom. These are, I got some pictures coming up here of these things. So of those. So be aware of that. If you've got a straight transom, straight down, like a lot of the aluminum boats, you're gonna have a different deal there. Step transom will be tucked up underneath there. Here is a picture of, I think this is Doc's boat. So you can see the transducer mounting board. See how it's set up like this? Now, if by chance you didn't get this height just right and you drilled it into the hull right here, and you got to re-drill 2 new holes, nothing brings a tear to your eye worse than having to drill more holes in a brand new boat. So here, 2 screws hold this plastic thing on with a little silicone behind it. So let's say you got to move this up or down and it's beyond the point where you got those holes drilled into the back of your boat. Well, it's a lot easier to drill it in that plastic than it is your boat. Same with the structure scan transducer. Now here's a good example of how to install the side scan transducer. And I got some more pictures coming up here. But remember, the beam of side scan comes off to the side like that. If these were flipped around where this transducer, this is the high-speed skimmer transducer. So this gives you your 2D, this will give you your side scan and your down scan. If this one was up higher than this one, what may happen is when this may hit, the signal from the side scan on the left-hand side may hit this transducer, and you may not get a good picture through it. You may see a line or a streak on your screen. I had that happen to me, and it took me a little while when I first started doing this stuff, figure out what the heck was going on. But this is something to be aware of, is that, I got some more pictures of this, but be aware of, on side scan, where that signal is going. Here, 2D, it's coming straight down. Down scan is coming straight down. But your side scan is going side to side. Doc's boat, Sonar Extreme Transducer. This is his boat. He does a lot of testing of various items. So that is transducer overload. But you can see he's got the transducer mounting boards here. So he can take off various transducers and switch them around, move them around, do different things without having to drill a bunch of holes in his boat. Mounting structure scan or the side scan transducers, if you have a stepped hull, here are some various locations that you can do it. If your step is big enough, many bass boats and those guys will mount this up underneath the step or underneath the jack plate. Reason being is they're not using their side scan technology when they're on plane. And when it's mounted up here and you're fishing in stumps in shallow water, if it's mounted down here, there's a good chance if you're running through a stump field or whatever, this is going to get knocked off or broken. And I've cracked one on mine in the river, hit a rock going backwards. So a location like this would work for when you're idling along. The water level's up here, and so then this is in the water, nice and clean, and a good signal off to the side. Down here, if you're a walleye fisher fishing open water and things like that, don't plan on hitting anything like that. Here's a good spot to mount it, just like in that. Oops. That's back up wrong way. Like this. This is how it would be. So, one thing to be aware of on aluminum. Well, let's see here. Don't mean to keep jumping back and forth here. Now, if you look at this boat right here, and you look at how long these transducers are, like the structure scan. If you don't have a stepped hull and this thing's hanging out here, when you put this big motor down all the way, it's going to block the signal. There's nothing you can do about it. So just be aware of that, is that when you're using side scan with the big motor, you're going to have to trim it up to clear the signal for this structure scan transducer. There's nothing you can do about it. That's the way it is. So be aware of that. Let's say you got your boat all mounted up, everything works, you hit the water, take off in your boat, get on the water, turn your structure scan on, and you don't see a signal on, like for example, this side, the left side of side scan. You're all flustered, this thing doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. Peek over the back of the transom, see if anything's blocking it. Maybe you got a kicker motor that's hanging down here, or you have your big motor down. Trim your big motor up, and more than likely, voila, it'll start working. And see, that's kind of where this is a little bit different. Stepped hull, motor's hanging back here. It's not going to have any interference. You can run your big motor down. It won't interfere with it back here. One thing to be aware of when you mount a transducer like this to a jack plate, sometimes that signal will hit the other side of the jack plate and you'll have streaks across on your screen. So if you got it mounted tight to the jack plate like that, because you know if you mount it to one side, you know you got two sides of a jack plate, you get left and right. So you got to mount it one side. That signal may hit the inside of that jack plate on the far side and give you some issues. So like I said, do some research before you start drilling holes. And there's some good mounts out there for side scan or for your, side scan technology transducers. Here's my boat. I don't have a very big stepped hull on my boat. It's about 6 inches. Well, this is my 3D transducer here. And here's my skimmer transducer here. My boat, I went to the local supply house, got a chuck of 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch plastic ABS, I think it is, and a cardboard template, and just kind of custom made my own trolling mounter board, my own board. So I had another transducer that I took it off, but it was down here at one time. And but anyway, so you see on my boat, I got this is a 3D transducer. On my boat, I don't have an issue with the signal hitting the motor. You're going to ask what this block of foam is. Because these transducers, if you look at the side of them, are so long, I have issues in my boat running through big waves that this transducer will tip up after a while. So I found a foam block, cut it, got this set right, cut the block, wedged it in there, tie wrapped it in there so that way this doesn't push up. It's got a little bit of give if I hit something, but in the waves and stuff, it stays where I want it. Let's see here. So here's an example of a boat, and I'm not sure whose this is. It doesn't, you can mount on both sides like this. So here you can see his side scan transducer or structure scan over here, and his skimmer transducer on this side. It's okay. The only issue with this is if you're going to use structure scan overlay, where you overlay your down scan over your 2D picture, they recommend you have it within a foot of each other. I don't use that. This is somebody else's boat. So the other issue over here too you got to be aware of is these ladders that go up and down. Let's say you put this ladder down here, somebody crawls up there and accidentally steps on your big transducer sticking out, it may bend it down. Oops. So anyway, and this boat here for sure would have to have the motor tilted up in order to see the side scan to work properly. Here's a case of, I talked to you earlier, a visual. He's going to have a good signal off to this side over here and a really bad signal picture over here on this side of the boat. Why? Because he's hitting the side of this setback. So takes a little bit of creativity, a little imagination. My boat, my old boat, I had this transducer mounted back. I had I had a plastic plate here, okay? This is attached to a 1/2 inch plate. I couldn't get a signal off to the right-hand side. Well, come to find out, it was hitting this easy pump live well pickup. So on the side scan, I could see it on my screen. I had a streak on my screen. And so I ended up doubling up the thickness of this transducer board, pushing it back further, and then it cleared that. Let's see if anybody's got any questions here. Well, those of you who want to grab a beer here real quick, go ahead. I'm going to see if anybody's got any questions going on here. Pop up here. There we go. Let's see here. Scroll down here, bear with me. I'm going to see if there's any new ones that pop up. Jarrett Bauer asks, is the external GPS worth the added cost? Does it help that much? What you're looking at on that external GPS module that you see on that on some of those NMEA 2000 diagrams, what that is a 0.1 compass. The GPS module that comes in these units works very well, the built-in GPS, but the one thing they lack is the ability to tell you which direction you're heading or sitting when you're on the water still. They will, you notice how your boat spins around if you're sitting still, things like that. That external GPS compass on a 0.1 it's called, is actually a heading sensor. There's an arrow on it. It points to the front of your boat. And I believe like Humminbird has one, things like that. So if you're a stationary fisherman, you sit still a lot, and you got your sonar set at, let's say, heading up, you know, so it skips around on the page, that will eliminate that problem. Other than that, it works. The internal one works just fine. So that's why I got one of those in my boat. Let's see here. One more question from Jared. I have a transducer that is glassed into the bottom of my Lund GL. It is not reading depth. I have bottom lock as well as sonar returns, but not the digital display. It was installed before I purchased it. I cannot vouch for Jared. What unit do you? Well, a couple things on your deal. If you're not seeing digital depth, are you actually seeing? Is there for example, a Lowrance? Are you seeing it does it say it on the screen? Like I talked to a gentleman this weekend. He was seeing bottom. He was getting bottom lock, good sonar returns, but the digital depth was not turned on the unit. So, for example, on a Lowrance, you go into the overlay, you go in there and tell it to overlay or show the digital depth on the screen. So there's a setting on that. If you want to drop me a note on Dr. Sonar, I'd be, let me know. If it's a Lowrance unit, I can help you out there. If it's a Humminbird unit, Doc can help you out on there. So so if you're getting a good solid bottom lock and sonar returns, it may just not be turned on or enabled on the screen. Andy Mitchell asks, does my LSS2 transducer also have the capability of a 2D capabilities? No, it does not. Downscan only on that. Now, Lowrance has the new one out called a total scan transducer, which is coming on new units, which is everything in one. It gives you this the 2D, the side scan, down scan, all in one transducer. But no, 2D or LSS2 does not have 2D capabilities. That's what the extra transducers for that you saw in some of those pictures. Pat, transducer placement for aluminum boats with sponsons. Good question. Tell you what, take a picture of the back of your boat, Pat, and send a message on Dr. Sonar, and with the picture of the back of your boat, picture's worth 1,000 words, and we can try and help you out with a good placement. I had one last week with the sponsons. A guy had the sponsons on the back of his boat, and he had the structure scan mounted between the two sponsons. Well, he couldn't get side scan because the side scan was hitting the side of the hitting the sponsons out to both sides. So maybe on the back of a sponson might be a good spot for it. So send me, Pat, post a picture on Dr. Sonar and the messages or whatever on Facebook, and I can get a better idea, because I don't think you can mount a, post a picture here. Let's see here. One second here, I'm going to scroll up and down here, make sure if I missed your question, when I'm all done, retype it in, and I'll try and get to it. So, Glenn, I hope I answered your question. What I would do if I were you, I'd go look for another Lund 208 tiller with a similar setup, or you kind of saw what we got going on with some of these other boats right here. I don't know how big the step is on the back of your boat, but it might take some creativity to get it mounted on the step. Like, for example, on the bottom of Ranger, that step is, what, 2 feet long, like a 620 or fisherman. A lot of people just mount it right up on the bottom of that. That's a good deal. But I'm not real familiar with the step on a 208 tiller. Anthony asked a question. He's late. I really didn't go through the total differences of all the transducers. I was talking more about mounting them. If you got a specific question, Anthony, type it in the Q&A in the upper left-hand corner, and that will be easier for me to do. And so I'm assuming you're listening. So go to the Q&A upper left-hand corner there. Type your question in, and I'll see if I can get to it. Yeah, we got them thunderstorms up here living in the Twin Cities and just tornado warnings. Weird. Okay, so let's move on. Here's a little tip that kind of learned on side scan. There's a place called Pickwick Marine. He's on Facebook. He's out of the South, Tennessee or someplace like that. Anyway, he knows Doc Sampson, and we kind of share information back and forth. But he had this really cool tip. If you I can't get my picture out of the way there. On the side scan transducer, you know, in your 2D transducer, they tell you to kind of angle it to the front of the boat a little bit, you know, so when you're up on plane, you get a good reading and things like that. Well, if you look at a side scan transducer, if you level it to the bottom of your boat, when you're sitting in the boat, the back end of your boat's going to sit in the water down deeper than the front. So if you level your side scan transducer with the bottom of your boat, run at the same parallel course or straight, well, when you think about it, the back end of that transducer is actually sitting lower than the front. And what's side scan trying to do? It's looking to the side. It's trying to find you want to try and get it a level plane to look off to the side of the boat. So here's kind of a cool little tip. Take a bubble ruler with you next time you're in the water and grab a handful of washers or something like that and get your boat what you would consider a normal load. You know, you got your buddy with you, fill the live well up. Take a level bubble washer like that, or any level, but a little 6-inch one works best because it's pretty much the same length as a transducer. Okay, get your boat loaded up how you normally would. Take that level, put it on the gunnel or the floor. There we go. Keep my finger off the next button. And find level with the transducer. Stack a couple of washers underneath the one end of the level here. So you know what that distance is from the ruler to the gunnel or the gunnel to the floor. So that way you got an idea the angle of the boat. Save those washers or coins or whatever, you know, throw them in a, you know, put them in a bag or just whatever, set them aside. When you pull your boat out of the water, take your tongue jack and raise your boat, you know, set this on the side of your boat again and raise your boat, the front of the boat up. So put the 2 washers underneath the one end of the ruler, on one end of the level, and then take your tongue jack, raise it up. So this is now showing level. You'll be surprised at how off level your side scan transducer is. So what I do is loosen up the bolts, put the level on the back side of the side scan transducer, lift it up so it's level, tighten the bolts up. Here's my foam block to keep it from moving. And so next time you put your boat in the water, your transducer, your structure scan transducer, for the most part, will be parallel with the water surface. So the back end isn't hanging way down here. And so then you'll get a nice flat reading. So the side scan transducer is parallel with the water, and you're probably going to find might get a little better picture. So we have a link to that. The gentleman from Pickwick Marine, he's actually doing it on the water. So he actually has a video. So anyway, I got a link on Doc Sampson's Facebook page. Kind of a cool tip. Gives you a little better picture, you know, so that way the back end of that site, because that thing is pretty long. It's a foot long, I bet, and kind of gets kind of out of whack. Batteries and chargers. I guess my thing is I can only use a single battery for my electronics and my starting battery. I use the biggest battery I possibly can, a 31 series Optima D31. It's the biggest one they make. I've never had an issue after fishing a day of tournaments running on the water with all my sonars running the live well pumps. So if you're buying a new boat and you're putting a ton of electronics on it, be aware of that. If you put the, maybe it comes with, what is it, 24 series battery, a little tiny one in there. Good luck. But at the end of the day, carry some jumper cables with you so you can jumpstart your motor. Again, don't scrimp on size and capacity. Battery loads, for example, you got the pumps, sonars, radios, lights. So you're night fishing. You got all your, you got your lights on in the boat. All that stuff adds up to a load on that battery. And you go cheap on your battery, you're going to have a long night on the water. And hopefully you got a cell phone signal so somebody can find you. Some boats, if you have the room for separate batteries for your electronics, and that, pretty much eliminates a lot of issues for interference. Cover the battery posts. I know up here in Minnesota, that is, if you get pulled over by the DNR stop, they pop your battery compartment open and check to see if your posts are covered. And it's just a good idea in general. But that battery comes loose back there and it's flopping around in that back compartment and something shorts out from terminal to terminal, you're going to have a big mess back there, possibly a fire. I personally use an AGM battery. Again, I mentioned earlier, Optima battery, AGM battery. Some of the benefits over a lead acid is it's no maintenance, basically. You don't have to worry about the water, no filling it up, things like that. Spill proof. So like in my boat, I stuff a 31 series in there. I have to turn it sideways and lower it down, and then I can twist it to get it in there. If I did that with like a lead acid battery, I'd be spilling acid all over the place. So I take that, I got a big one in there. It's a small compartment. Once I get in there, I got a lot of room, but getting through the door is a real pain. And typically they have more cycle lives, but they do cost more, but I think they're worth it. So here's my setup in my boat, my trolling motor. Over here, you can see my circuit breaker down here for my trolling motor, and 36 volt over here. Everything's strapped down. This sits down underneath everything's all kind of packed underneath there, so I don't have these covered up. But back here, this is kind of wide open, and this is my main battery. So in theory, I suppose I should have these covered up, but once it's tucked underneath there, there's nothing else that can get underneath there. It's underneath a board. Battery chargers, there's all kinds of different battery chargers out there. Depending on how many volt trolling motor system you got. If you got a 36 volt trolling motor system, you're gonna have either a 3-bank. For example, on my boat, I got a 4-bank battery charger on my boat. When I plug it in at the end of the night or at the end of the day, with the 4-bank, I got 4 batteries. My starting battery, my 3 trolling motor batteries, a 4-bank charger. Then I know my starting battery, like electronics battery, is topped off at the end of the day, and it's ready to go the next day. I'll be aware. Look at the size of the battery charger based on your needs and requirements. If you're gonna if you're gonna extend out the leads, sometimes you can't get the battery charger right where you need it. You can extend out the leads to where you want them. And again, manufacturers' recommendations. A lot of times you can buy an extension kit. Solid charger in a ventilated area to keep cool. They do put off heat. Ease of use, one plug, do all your batteries. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, I did. Okay. Just on the bottom right-hand corner here, some Optima makes some single-bank chargers that are pretty cool. They will handle all types of batteries. They actually do a lot of stuff if you got a single battery, and it works great on lead acid, AGM batteries, deep cycle batteries. It's got different settings on it. It'll recondition a battery. It'll bring a battery back to life. Sulfating and things like that. Pretty cool deal. Check them out on their website. They're pretty handy. I use this one on my ATV, and sometimes I'll put this one on my truck or my, and it's got ports in the sides and things like that. Pretty cool battery chargers. Pretty high tech. Work really well. One thing to look for on the battery charger. A couple things here, important things to look at. Recovery rate. Will it fit in the size of the area that I want to put it in? Some of these chargers get pretty big. Will it fit in the space that you want? You know, output. If you're buying a battery charger, and for example, I run Optima AGM batteries, be aware of each battery takes a different charging curve. AGM, there's a lead acid battery and a high performance AGM. A lot of these battery chargers will have various settings on them to do different things. If you look by this example here, there's a different absorption, a float mode, so you can see each one of these voltages are a little bit different. If you talk to the people from Optima, that's the thing that kills batteries, is most likely the incorrect charging rate. So be aware of that if you're buying a new charger. If you're, let's say you're putting AGM batteries in there, be aware of the fact that you need to have a battery charger that will set up and handle that style of battery. Let's see, we already talked about that. Let's see. Oops. Apologize here, my question and answer thing kind of disappears once in a while. I don't see too many more yet. We'll keep on going here. We'll get right to the end. And those of you that want to boogie can. Talked a little bit about earlier, use never sees on trolling motor bolts, even a stainless steel, prevents galling of the mating surfaces and improves corrosion resistance. Talked about earlier, label all the wires. Draw a wiring diagram. Take a little notebook, write everything down. Support the wiring with tie wraps after you've checked everything out, so you don't get everything all nice and neat and you find out something doesn't work, then you got to cut everything out and restart over again. Carry extra fuses of the correct size. Don't bypass fuses. That'll kill a warranty real big hurry. If you stick maybe a 10 amp fuse in a sonar that requires a 3 amp fuse, well, they can tell that stuff happens. So always use the correct fuses, especially on this electronic stuff. Recheck all your connections after a few outings. After a couple day of pounding through the waves, things come loose. Recheck all your connections. Look for wires rubbing on sharp edges. Same thing. Use a wire loom, this plastic coating over wires if you got them running through areas that are questionable, like underneath the floor of a boat. You know, you got sharp edges. Nothing's worse than cutting a wire or having a short underneath the floor of your boat and not being able to find it. Let's see here. Another kind of a cool add-on feature for some sonars is a pretty cool little function here. It works well on the Lowrance units because on the Gen with the sonar input or the video input, and I think some of the other manufacturers have video inputs, is an AquaView underwater camera. Cooler than neat. It's really cool. See your fish on sonar. Yeah, you can. The big question, Dr. Sampson's Facebook page is, what are these fish I'm seeing on sonar? I see the fish arches. What are they? Well, without catching them, it's pretty hard to tell what they are. And so anyway, this is what an AquaView looks like. It's got a little box here, plugs into the video input of a sonar or an HDS Gen 3, for example. Drop the camera down. Here's a northern pike. Here's a school of panfish. Last summer, I was up north fishing a tournament. Went over a beautiful school of fish. Couldn't get them to bite for nothing. Dropped the camera down after about 15 minutes. It was a school of suckers, just suspended right off the bottom. Well, I was fishing for walleyes, and the suckers aren't going to bite. So cool little gizmo there. Securing your sonars and trolling motors. This will keep the honest people honest. It's called an E-lock. It's made by DuraSafe, so you can Google search it. What it does is it replaces the hand screws on the ends of your sonars that hold them on there. And it's got a little, it comes with a stainless steel screw. So you take the hand knobs off, and it's got a little cup, that a washer type of apparatus. You take the screw, put it through the little cup, tighten it up with a Phillips screwdriver, and you put these over there, and they're keyed. So once you put them on there, they lock on there. You can spin these, and they're not going to come off. Now, if somebody wants your stuff, they're going to get it. But if you're just whipping into a gas station and running into a place for a quick bite to eat, these things are red, they stand out. It's going to make somebody think twice before they jump in there and start ripping on stuff on your boat. And it could save yourself some headaches. But yeah, they're kind of cool little apparatus. Like I said, they just fit right in the end of the knobs, replace the knobs. Blank page. Okay, that's it. Thank you for attending. This will be recorded. And if you have any further questions, feel free to ask away. My little boxes popping up here, chat. Leo says, thanks for the presentation. You're welcome. And you're welcome. Hope you guys learned something out of this. And let's see here. Get this back up here. This is basically an installation type setup, just tips and tricks I've done over the years, working back and things like that I've seen. So please, let's see here. A little input on the different head units like the Elite, Hook Elite, and the HDS. Yeah, I'll hang around and answer some of these questions. Those, I mean, like I said, if you got questions, feel free to hang around. Anthony, this is Anthony Gervais. I said that right. The Hook and Elite series are designed to be a standalone unit. Now we're not talking about the Elite TIs. Well, the Elite TIs in a way. Hook and Elite are an entry level, kind of an entry level unit, especially the Hook. Very simple to operate. Everything's pre-programmed, standalone unit. You're not going to network it to anything else. So let's say you got a tiller boat or a console boat. You just want one unit on the dashboard or on the console back. Hook unit, or they got what they call the Elite TI, which is actually almost like an HDS without the networking capabilities. It has the touchscreen and things like that. So you can then, so it's like an old Gen 2, it's like a Gen 2 HDS without the networking. Very good unit for a standalone unit. Operates very well. Touchscreen, very intuitive. HDS, for example, then is designed for a network type system. If you want to add extra components and things like that to it eventually down the road. So like my boat, for example, I got one on the console and one up in the bow. Actually got two of them on the console, one up in the bow, different inputs and components like that. That's where the HDS comes into play. So any other, let's see here, I'm going to scroll back through. Any other questions that you might have? Let's see. Let's see, I think my thing popped up here. What manufacturers make trolling motor support brackets? Oh, there's getting to be more and more. For example, on mine, I just got a Ram one. They actually make it's actually a trolling motor system. The bracket, you know, it's got the ball that fits on the gunnel, and then it's got a swivel bracket, or the portion that flips up, and it's got a little ball that fits up there on the side of the trolling motor. You just twist it on there. There are some that bolt to the floor of the bow, you know, the floor of the boat, and then they kind of clamp over it. So there's a bunch of different ones. I think like Cisco makes one. I know Ram makes one. Pretty much a lot of these sonar mount manufacturers make one of some sort nowadays. So, you know, like I say, go to Cisco, go to Ram mount, look at theirs, things like that. Let's see here. So anyway, Anthony, just jump back to your deal up there. Anthony Gervais he asked about which unit would be. Yeah, the Hook would be perfect. If you operate a smartphone, if you got like a cell phone, look at the Elite TIs. You can get into a touchscreen pretty inexpensive. It's a little bit more than the Hook, but the keypad units are like operating a flip phone. The touchscreen units are operating like operating a smartphone. I ran a keypad unit next to a Gen 2 when they first came out with the touchscreen, and it drove me nuts trying to operate the HDS 8 because I kept on tapping on the screen. And it's amazing how much faster it is to get around the touchscreen. Again, it's like if you operate a smartphone and have somebody hand you a old keypad phone or flip phone, try and text on that thing one time. You'll want your smartphone back. So check out the Elite TI. And there's a number of different sizes. Don't scrimp on size. Don't get too small of a unit. Remember, that's one thing I hear about boat shows. People buy a new boat. It's coming with they're all excited. It's coming with a 4-inch sonar. And it's like, you're not going to like it after a little year in the water. You're like, oh, I wish I would have come back, and I wish I would have got a bigger unit. So, Ken Allen, are there any drawbacks to the Lowrance total scan transducer? Not that I know of. Ease of installation, one transducer now. It's everything in one. you don't need to worry about the mounting 2 transducers on your back of your boat. It's one plug into the back of the unit. You get everything in one. So no, it's I run the 3D, so that's why I got the 2 transducers. If I was just going to run down scan and side scan, I probably would have the total scan. Jarrett Bauer asks, what is the difference between Navionics premium chip and a platinum chip? Navionics premium chip, they phased out a few years ago. Navionics premium chips were kind of a base mapping chip, an entry-level chip. They came with what they call their nautical charts, their base mapping. And the platinum chip has the base mapping, but it also has what they call the sonar chart layer. And actually, we'll just talk about the platinum chip. So the platinum chip has a sonar chart layer. The sonar chart layer is where if you buy a new platinum card, let's say tomorrow, take it home and register it, you can then update the sonar chart data with call it the freshest data, the sonar chart layer on that card. So your card isn't going to go bad within a year. So if you got a year of updates, unlimited updates to that platinum card. Platinum card also has satellite imagery or overlay. So a satellite overlay. So certain parts of the country have satellite overlay. Can be handy. I run a platinum chip because I like the satellite overlay if I get to areas like backwater areas of rivers and things like that. It actually has satellite imagery that you can turn on. Not all areas have it, but quite a few areas do. One thing to be aware of, the platinum card does require a higher end unit to run. It's designed to run, like, for example, the Lowrance HDS units, the higher end Humminbird units, higher end Raymer units. It won't run like on a Hook unit, things like that. So make sure you check the compatibility guide. Now, they do make a Navionics Plus card that's a Regions card that's preloaded with the sonar chart layer. It's like the Platinum card or Regions card. It comes with the sonar chart layer. It's like the next evolution of the premium card, where the premium card only had the base mapping, the nautical charts. Navionics Plus Regions card comes with the sonar chart layer, and that will operate in quite a few units. Let's see here. So hopefully I answered your questions on that. How about built-in transducers for trolling motors? Good, bad, or worth the money? I do it for simplicity's sake. This is Anthony. Ask the trolling motor transducers built in. I run it for simplicity's sake. One thing I will tell you that, for example, the motor guide uses a Lowrance transducer in their motor, from what I'm told. So that you can run a, so it's more or less designed to run with the Minn Kota unit, or the Lowrance unit is kind of designed to run with the motor guide unit. Now we're like a motor guide, or keep all these straight here. Minn Kota will work with a Lowrance, but probably work better with a Humminbird unit because of the built-in, because it's the same manufacturer. So I like it. It's just simple. There's no, especially I run a power drive unit. If I were to put an external transducer on my power drive unit, I would have an external cable hanging off the side of the unit, which is a pain in the butt. So, for example, my power drive unit, the transducer cables run up inside of the shaft, so it's a nice clean installation. John Easton asks, how long does the sonar chart data take to update? The reason I ask is some data I submitted last year still does not show here in South African waters. Typically a week. John, go to Navionics, go to the help on the top corner, or send me a message on Doc's Facebook page. And but I think the easiest place for you to start, John, go to navionics.com, go to the help section. It's on the top. You'll see in the top right corner of the website. Type in your information, what's going on. They will then give you a case number and get back to you. They're pretty good at it. If you want to send me the info, once you do that, because then you're right to the R&D and right to the product, the troubleshooting people. But if you want to reach out to me after the fact and give me that case number, I can kind of look at it from the back side of it or my side of the things. But typically it's a week. So something went wrong there. Oh, also, John, if you go to the Navionics website, log into your account, you can see all the data that you uploaded to Navionics. It'll tell you if it's been rejected or processed. If you don't see it in the queue, they haven't got it yet. But if you see it, it's been rejected. If you click on it, it will tell you why it was rejected. So if you go to Navionics, log into your account, go to the bottom left-hand side where your account is, your uploads. There's actually, it'll tell you all your uploads are listed there, and it will tell you the status. If you don't see them there, it may not have gotten uploaded. So, so that's a good place to start. That's the first place, John, I'd start. Go to navionics.com, log onto your account, scroll down to where you've uploaded your logs, and it'll tell you the status of them. And go there. Let me know what you find. Let's see here. Jarrett Bauer asking, what do I need to update my HDS Gen 2 to work with the new Sonar chart live mapping? I saw something on a video. Jarrett, right now Gen 2 isn't I haven't seen the update yet for Gen 2. I heard through the grapevine Gen 2 was going to get the live mapping, Sonar chart live mapping, but I haven't seen anything specific about it. It's pretty cool stuff. The HDS Gen 2, don't just hold on a little bit, because what they're going to do, they're going to support all the current products on the market. So they got Gen 3, Elite TI, and the carbons that are coming out. So, so just watch the website, things like that, and we'll see. Because basically a Gen 2 is very similar to an Elite TI as far as functionality and things like that. So keep an eye on the website and go from there. Richard Swanson, if you were to mount a 12-inch finder, what mount would you look at? Well, a 12-inch size finder. I mean, I don't want to throw RAM under the bus, but I have not had good luck with RAM when they're mounted any. So Cisco is a good one. Shoot, drawing a blank on the other one. If you looked at, I talked earlier, there's one called Balls Out, BALZOUT. That thing is built like a rock. I got my front unit mounted on a 12-inch tall extension, and I run some big waves, and that thing is yet to move. I think I could walk up there and tear it out of the floor by grabbing the head unit, tear the screws out of the floor before that thing would move. So RAM, I just have not had good luck with them. They'll move after a while, and you find after a while you see people. Well, there's a picture of one on there. You'll see people with like foam stuffed underneath them to keep from bouncing around. So, Anthony says, "Will you be able to watch this again?" Yes, I hope I recorded it. Hit the record button, and everything works. So yes, I'll have it available. Watch the Navionics Facebook page, watch drsonar.com or Dr. Sonar's Facebook page, or my YouTube page. Just Google search Kurt Hedquist on YouTube, and I've got some videos on there. So if everything works right, yes, you should be able to watch it again. Let's see here. I should have tapped. Not too many people we got left on the board here, if anybody's fallen asleep yet. Oh, we got 16 people left hanging out here. Wow. Either you've fallen asleep on your computers or you're thinking of a question. If I haven't got to your question, type it in again, because it'll pop up on the bottom of the queue here. I'll give it about a couple more minutes here, and then we'll sign off. But yeah, no, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of, I mean, these things are pretty high-powered computers. You wouldn't think so, but there's a lot goes on with these things, and okay, here's one. Is it Better to get a larger screen, Elite TI, or a smaller screen, Gen 3. This is Dan Carney. Dan, if you're going to have a standalone unit, just a single unit, never plan on networking it to another sonar, things like that. I would go for the bigger screen Elite TI, personally. I mean, there's some good deals on the Gen 3s out there, but well, I've never had anybody complain about a too big a screen. So bigger screen, you know, as we get older, things are very hard to see. So if you just plan on having a standalone unit, that's it. Get an Elite TI. You can network in like the motor guide trolling motor to it. You can do on Elite TI some limited networking through NMEA 2000. So if you bought another Elite TI, you can share waypoints on the Elite TI because it has NMEA 2000, but both units have to be turned on in order for that to happen. So that would be my 2 cents worth on the Elite TI versus the Gen 3. You have standalone unit, don't plan to network, go for the Elite TI. Do structure scan transducers chew up batteries? No, they don't. And I have my questions about the Tipe-GL transducer glassing posted to this Navionics webinar link or on Dr. Sonar. Thanks for a very informative web tip. Posted on the Dr. Sonar's Facebook page. You can do it in private message if you want, and we'll check it out. Anthony, again, FYI, I have an HDS5 on my helm, and I hate it because of the size. Oh, he's just commenting backwards. He has a HDS5 on my helm, and he hates it because of the screen size. So go big. Yeah, that's another thing, too. Getting back to Dan's question. If, for example, nice thing about a big screen, if you're just going to run one unit, if you got GPS, you got your 2D sonar, and you got structure scan going all at the same time on one screen, that gets pretty small in a hurry. I mean, those screens get pretty tiny. So if, depending on your boat situation and things like that, you know, because the 12-inch screen, you can break up into 4 panels. You almost got 4 or 5-inch units if you wanted to. So hope that answers that question for you. Anybody else got anything here? I'm gonna hang out here for a little longer. Got a little longer than expected, but there was a lot of information to cover, and I guess you guys hung out for quite a while. And I thank you very much for hanging out. And there's my email on the bottom there. If you want to send me an email at that link too, you can. khedquist@navionics.com. I can help you out via how often do you guys do this? Anthony asks. Go to navionics.com, scroll down to the bottom right-hand page on the website, and you'll see a thing that says webinars. They do these, we do these maybe 2 of these a week throughout the course of the year. There's a whole library of these things on there. So yeah, you can subscribe to them. You can reserve, you know, you can get reminders when they're coming up. So yeah, go to navionics.com and then go to the bottom where it says webinars, and you can click on that and you can find a whole list of them are coming up. Last week they had Tim Horton, who just won that Bassmaster tournament down south. He was on live, and just by chance he was scheduled to be on 2 days after he won the tournament. So that was kind of cool. And have you personally viewed or seen in action the Boat 2 trailer or grotto latch? I have not. No, I haven't. Let's see here. Anybody else got anything? If not, find me. There's all kinds of ways to reach me. I'm going to sign off for the night and call it a night here. So you guys have a good night and take care. Good fishing.